start?
We can start, yeah. Well, tēnā koutou. Good evening, everyone. To start this meeting this evening, we'll start with a karakia. And the meaning of this karakia is seek knowledge to understand, have purpose in all you do, stand tall, be strong, let us show respect for each other. E te whanahui, whaia te mātaranga ki a marama, kia whai take na mahi katoa, tu maia, tu kaha, araha atu, araha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. I'm Gillian Bishop. I'm from Tasman Environmental Trust. The Trust leads work to protect and restore our natural heritage in this region. And tonight and for this series, we're partnering with the Climate Forum. Joanna Santa Barbara is with the Climate Forum. Joanna.
Welcome, everyone. The Climate Forum's a community group who facilitate local action on climate change. And we're running these Meet the Candidate events because it's vital that our councillors take urgent action to help our communities adapt to the climate crisis. This is a crucial time for Aotearoa New Zealand as we move towards the 2030 milestone, by which time we've agreed to almost halve our emissions. And we also have to adapt to change and also respond to a biodiversity crisis. So we're eager to hear how council candidates intend taking on this unprecedented challenge once you're elected. And we do thank you very much for agreeing to meet with us. So Gillian will say a few words about procedure.
Thank you. Our session will run until 8:30. In the first hour, we have a short list of pre-prepared questions, which you've received. And each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the question. So we'll, in order to get through the questions and to give everyone a fair chance, we will be timing you, and we'll say time's up if your time's running out. So please respect the fact that the participants have joined because they want to hear your views on climate and biodiversity. It's quite okay to pass if you don't want to address a question. We're recording the session and it will subsequently be available on our website. Don't be discouraged if it doesn't look as if there's too many people attending the session this evening. We've just been talking with our support people, and we know that there are many people who have looked at the previous sessions on YouTube. So yeah, so your responses have quite a longer life than just this hour and a half. Is anyone, let me know if you're uncomfortable with the recording. In the last 20 minutes, we're going to ask candidates to address a selection of questions taken from the floor. So for the participants, please type your questions into the chat box and we'll pick them up from there. You can type your questions in the chat box anytime. The chat box is at the bottom of your screen. So if you just move your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, you can type in a question on the chat box. The candidates for the MOTUEKA Award are Ian Palmer. Now, Ian has sent his apologies, but he's actually sent some written responses to the questions. So Joanna will read Ian's responses out when it comes to his turn. We have Brent Maru tonight, welcome. Nick Hughes probably not. He's indicated that he may not be able to come. Barry Dowler, he is not here as yet anyway. Barbara Luondo, Richard Brown, Tarina Graham, and Trindy Walker. I'm going to start, we're going to rotate, and it just so happens that Ian Palmer's at the top of the list for the first question. So Joanna is going to tell us for Ian, tell us who you are, what are your outstanding credentials in the area of action on climate and biodiversity.
Okay, so this is what Ian says. I'm 59, born and bred local, spent my entire life as a steward of some prime horticulture land in Lower MOTUEKA until I recently sold my interests. I'm very satisfied in the knowledge that I passed the land to the new owner in a much better condition than when we started. That's it.
Good. Brent. We can't hear you, Brent. Maybe you've got a microphone problem again. Perhaps if we go to Barbara and see if you can sort your problem out. Okay, yes. Barbara, please tell us who you are and what are your outstanding credentials as far as climate and biodiversity are concerned.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Joanna. And thank you for hosting this event. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm an experienced policy advisor with 18 years in climate change, disaster risk reduction, sustainable development, with strong skills in engagement and collaboration. My experience has been centered on the development of climate change policy, focused on the inclusion of communities. I have worked at local, national, regional, and international levels with NGOs, national governments, and international organizations and communities. I am the lead author of several climate change policies, strategies, and plans, including embedding climate change in infrastructure projects and other sectors, most of them pretty much. I have provided advice to national and local governments on accessing climate financing. I've developed guidelines integrating climate change and biodiversity into strategic environmental assessment. I research climate-induced human mobility, resilience building, and policy innovation. In my spare time, I volunteer with women groups to lobby on climate action and on women's rights. With my partner, John, we've been transforming our small farm into an organic place. As a counselor, I would bring to the table experienced leadership on climate change, resilience, understanding of biodiversity, strategic thinking, and quality decision-making. I would bring also understanding of complex technical information, because as a policy advisor, I have the ability to unpack large volumes of information and use that to guide good decision-making for communities. As a professional with strong capability, I'd lobby for new ideas and beyond Tasman to enable our communities to adapt and thrive as we are really building a climate resilience at Aroa, New Zealand, and our district, here in our district in Tasman. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. How did you get on, Brent?
I think I'm okay now. Is that okay?
Right. Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Yep,
Fingers crossed, don't turn it off. Awesome, thank you. So I care about MOTUEKA and I care about our community and therefore care about the impact that climate has on our communities. I know the Council's adopted the Tasman Climate Action Plan, and a component within this commitment is to work collaboratively with iwi communities across Tasman and Nelson regions. And it's expected that'll be participation in the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum. It's essential, in my belief, to have any chance of making a difference that community, iwi, council and government all need to be part of the solution. Only then will true change comes. So personally, I don't think I have any outstanding credentials in the area of climate change and biodiversity, but I do have outstanding credentials in engaging communities, activating conversations, and I'm known as someone with integrity and who cares about people. So I did a little bit of research in terms of Radio New Zealand published an article quoting that overall New Zealand's total household emissions fell by 9.6%, but also put that down squarely to COVID-19 restrictions. So I remember lockdown 1. I remember when the roads were empty. I remember the sound of birds chirping in the streets. It was safe to walk around the neighbourhood. It showed what a total reset could actually achieve very, very quickly. But the economic impact of that was severe. So it can be certainly turned around tomorrow, but at what cost? It's about finding that balance and providing options and sharing and continuing the conversations in terms of involving the community. I know personally I stepped down from a role that I commuted to Stoke every day, so my personal emissions have dropped 80%, but how long is that viable is the question. And that's because where we live and where we work is vast. So some of us are lucky to live where we choose to live. Some may not. Some may have to commute. Others are forced to live outside the urban boundaries due to housing and rental availabilities. And with the current lack of flexible transport alternatives, some of the choices are limited. So in terms of combating the impacts of climate change, specifically flooding, we need to start talking also about, do we attempt to design and fund mitigating infrastructures and fund recovery and resilience? And if it's the later, then ultimately we need to have some really serious conversations. And I guess we're seeing them now with the Ruby Bay Hills and the Marlborough Sounds in terms of will infrastructure, in terms of roading be developed. So whilst my climate and biodiversity skills, I don't have any credentials, it is for me very much about bringing everybody along on the journey and having those conversations.
Kia ora, Brent. Richard Brown.
Kia ora, everyone. So my wife Jane and I have lived in MOTUEKA for over 40 years. We've raised 3 children and enjoy the wonderful lifestyle our beautiful region provides. And obviously our environment is a huge part of that. My working life has evolved from seasonal work as a young person to senior management on a large global firm. This experience has led me into my own business as a leadership coach, and I have the privilege of working with businesses to improve culture and performance. This experience sets me up well for serving you as a counsellor. Our community is rich in potential, but faces many challenges. I believe council has an important role to play in enabling business and community aspirations, and I wish to bring my business and management experience to contribute to a council that stands behind our community and not in its way. So as far as my outstanding credentials, climate ways, I just look to my business experience and most recently as manager of Redwood Cellars on the Moutere Highway. And over the last few years, we've done quite a lot practical things such as switching all our forklifts from petrol LPG over to electric. Created some really big savings in energy use and reduction in the water that we use at the cidery. We installed a wastewater MBR filtration plant, which has meant that our wastewater pond went from just being a real problem to actually an asset for that area, with improving the bird life and all sorts of animal life in and around that area. The other things we did with Redwood, we volunteered rubbish pickups along the inlet here at MOTUEKA and along the causeway. And also twice we've been up helping the birdsong to plant native trees. So I guess I've been contributing on a very practical sense, and that's what I bring to the table if I am successful in becoming a counsellor. Thank you.
Kia ora. Karina, what would you like to say about what you will be doing in the area of action on climate and biodiversity?
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko ruihini te maunga, ko orua te awa, ko tainui te waka, ko ngāti kauwhata te iwi, ko terena tuku ingoa. So I've got 3 daughters and 2 grandchildren. My work experience is in the corporate sector in Wellington, and we spent 7 years in Darfield, where I went into residential and commercial real estate. So it was good to get a polar view of the city life and rural life. I contracted to Lincoln University as the faculty manager for agribusiness and commerce, and have spent 4 years for the Project Management Institute as the operations manager, and then promoted to general manager. So fortunately, my work was remote, so we were able to move back to the top of the south in 2018. And the following year, I actually resigned and went into focus on my passion of delivering sport and wellbeing initiatives through a non-profit organisation. I've always been pro-environment. As a 10-year-old at Hamden Street School, I entered the Nelson Science Fair, and my project hypothesis was on accelerating the decomposition of rubbish through freezing process. I ended up coming first equal with 2 college boys and splitting the winnings, which was $33.33 each, which was a lot for a 10-year-old in the 80s. I turned vegetarian at age 14 and was recycling well before it became popular. As an 18-year-old, my landlord actually thought I was having lots of parties because I would collect all the neighbourhood's bottles to ensure they got recycled. So I really can't stand litter. Last weekend, I was doing a fly drop down a 3-kilometre stretch of our main road out here in MOTUEKA and collected about 2 paper shopping bags full of litter. More recently, I'm part of a self-reliant community gardening cooperative, the concept of which has generated interest throughout our region, encouraging more co-ops to focus local. And that's where my focus is. I'm standing for community wellbeing and the future for youth.
Kia ora, Tarini. And Trindi.
Kia ora, thank you for the opportunity to share with you this evening. So I got elected in as a Mott Ward councillor for Tasman District Council in 2019, and obviously I'm standing here now. I don't come with a stunning record of any scientific letters behind my name with regards to the climate and diversity, but what I can tell you is in the last 3 years, part of my role with Tasman District Council was to be on the climate forum as a Tasman District Council representative, and in that role I have been a strong advocate for our climate, and all decision making that I've done in the last 3 years around the table has been about trying to push a system, a resilient system that we need to address what's happening, and every decision that councillors make needs to have a climate action template. Like every decision, we just need to look at the impact that it's having on our climate. We need to be upfront and we need to be proactive. We need to be educating, and I've certainly been speaking into law changes both locally and government level, central government levels, to try and make our voice heard around the urgency to make some changes. So we don't say we're doing a climate action, have a climate action plan, and then the next day we sit around chambers and we vote for things that totally goes against what our climate needs to have changed. So in every decision that we make around council and that I've made, it has been about the well-being of life, the well-being of the web of life. So not just about us human beings. I work very collaboratively with other agencies. I am well engaged within my local community. And one of the other roles that I've had is I've been on the trust for the Nelson Tasman Coastal Transport Trust. So speaking into how we can reduce our carbon footprint by carpooling, car sharing. There's been a lot of movement, and I mean, that's an exciting thing as Tasman District Council morphs into having this public bus service that's going to start in July of next year. This little bus that we've got running currently is making movement, and it's taking away isolation for people and providing a means where we get more cars off the road and people are able to access services. So that's me.
Thank you. Thank you, Trindi. Now over to Joanna for the next question.
Okay, for this one, I'll start with you, Brent. The climate crisis clearly requires urgent and significant changes in how we live. please describe a climate relevant change that you will launch through council, if elected, in the next 3 years. And it could be in any area that you wish to talk about.
And you've got me, haven't you? Because I can see my microphone working. So firstly, in reviewing the current Tasman Climate Action Plan, there seems to be a lag in terms of tangible outcomes and specific measures within the current plan. So I guess the first thing in terms of the existing plan that's adopted by council is to have some more specific measures and some clearer outcomes that are going to be achieved. Also, in terms of encouraging and promoting working from home, so transport emissions we know accounts for 90% of our local CO2 emissions. So let's start with council. It's a medium-sized employer. Let's start with encouraging the continuation of remote working, because that'll also save in terms of the need to build a flash new council office accommodation block. So it sort of helps with both. The other thing in terms of just looking in terms of when the buildings that council own, in terms of whether they're community buildings or council key infrastructure, looking at the times when those renewals arrive to install solar. And more important, I think, just continue that partnership with government. So it's interesting, there's never been a better time for public transport to be the most successful across our district. So the fuel prices, the congestion on the road. So it's going to come down to a public transport system that it's frequent and reliable, and that's always going to be the challenge. So I would love nothing better than to have got into public transport, but I could start between 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning and come home between 6 and 7 at night. So we need that ability for it to be flexible and reliable, but there's never been a better time than to really invest into public transport in terms of what we're facing. But the other part is that continuation. It's a partnership. So Tasman District Council can't do this on their own. The community can't do this on their own. So the community, iwi, neighbouring councils and government is in terms of championing projects that are community-led, so wetland plantings and native replantings. Those community-led projects are going to be absolutely key for council to support and get them behind.
Thank you very much, Brent. And now to Barbara on that question.
Yes, thanks. Sorry. I'd be a little bit more strategic than that. I'd lobby council for the need of an overarching Tasman climate strategy with a strong vision to adapt and thrive as we're building a climate resilient district. From experience, you really do first need a plan that is solid to lay really then solid foundation. So a national climate change legislation and an adaptation plan are in place. So this means that we have a map and we know the destination for the next few years at least. TDC has a climate adaptation plan, which is a good start, but like Brent said, it will benefit from some updating clearly. We don't know, so we don't really know the journey, all the details of this journey, but many are already happening on the ground. We now clearly need to set sail for this journey and start this journey. But in council, to progress requires 7 votes. And first, you need to have the mayor and the councillor to commit to that overarching strategy if you want to build a climate resilient district. We will then, after you would suppose that all council and mayor are supportive of the idea, and so the staff, that we then carry out effective and proper consultations with the community. With that feedback, you generate climate change, you then can integrate, climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction, all the 3 of them, into all council strategies and policies. This is called mainstreaming, integrating. Concurrently, what I will be lobbying for is to start implementing climate action so that we start with the community-led participatory type of approaches. We just test, we try, we can make mistakes, it doesn't matter. We need to really hold hands to make best use of what it's already there on the ground. Like, for example,
sorry, Barbara, I'm afraid time's up.
Yes.
Sorry.
And we just, no worries. And yeah, and just hold hands and just use all of our networks out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. On to Richard for the same question.
Yeah, so I focused on, for this one, I focused on waste and recycling and landfill. And just from my experience at Redwood, it seems that there is quite a dysfunction between councils across Aotearoa on their recycling systems. So I think we really need to push for a unified recycling systems where the benefits of some councils are able to recycle most of their recyclable waste, and so we can do it as efficiently as possible. It's the other thing is that, and I know in Nelson they've got a trial, or it's actually underway, where there's a compost gathering initiative where so people can. My daughter, she can put her compost at the door and it's collected and it's taken away and composted. And that sort of thing, with methane being our biggest emitter from landfill, I think that we really need to push towards that sort of process, which in a practical sense shouldn't be too difficult to get underway. And then it's just bring the people along with us and train and educate people on the recycling, but also particularly on the composting, and to make sure that we can try and start reducing the methane levels of our landfill.
Thank you, Richard. On to Tarina.
Yeah, I concur there with Richard. Pollution's one of our biggest issues, whether it's air, land or sea. But I also look at it from the perspective of, sadly, greed, control and convenience driven by the focus of financial gains over health and well-being has dominated societies across the globe. For example, 8 million tonnes of plastic enter the oceans every year. And a research paper was done during the pandemic where they estimated 3 million face masks are thrown out every minute across the globe. And that's an equivalent to about 129 billion face masks a month. So plastic is a useful product and many felt protected wearing face masks, but both are examples whereby we're thinking we're fixing one problem, we're actually creating another one. So there needs to be a mix of personal responsibility, getting back to basics, just looking after each other and the environment and doing initiatives like that gardening co-op I talked about, and Richard just mentioned the compost one, which I think is a really good idea. But there also needs to be industry responsibility. So big international corporations with a monopoly and influence over politics needs to be exposed and managed. And in my opinion, the impacts on our farmers will be detrimental to our country, and the focus needs to be on the greedy conglomerates.
Thank you, Tarina. And now to Trindy.
Amongst my thoughts for the future are the need for positive adaptation to climate change, including the rejuvenation of wetlands, especially the local tidal inlets, and remediation of the natural environment. These precious areas are excellent carbon sinks. Other initiatives include encouraging responsibility for the removal of toxic substances and litter from the highways and the byways of where we live. That is to be a real clean, green, tidy Kiwi. In much the same way that anti-smoking lobbying reduce the incidence of smoking in our society, I champion a similar campaign to prevent littering. It is true that real concern about little things translates into doing positive things about the big ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Trindy. And now I'll just read Ian Palmer's response to that same question. He says, an individual can certainly lead the discussion, but it takes a collective approach from council and community to successfully achieve a climate relevant change at council. And we can certainly get like minds together to manage the significant impacts that climate change is challenging us with. The Tasman Climate Action Plan is a good start, but we're naive if we think this is going to be enough. It's not right to just single out one issue here. They're all intrinsically linked, and we need to find the right balance to take the community with us to address the massive challenge ahead of us. Climate change is real, it has always been, and it's patently obvious to me the impact our species is having on our planet. Okay, over to Gillian for the next question.
Thank you. Some of you have already mentioned the impact of transport on the climate. About 90% of local CO2 emissions are estimated to be from transport. And so this question is asking, what would you do to help reduce transport emissions, building on what TDC has already started? Now, Barbara, can you start?
Yes, I can. Thanks. So I guess that looking at the regional public transportation plan, which is what TDC is already starting, I think that we clearly need to build on the existing services, support accessibility and good urban design, provide probably a much larger proportion to our residents with a viable alternative of using private cars, be a little bit more sustainable, affordable, and contribute to meeting our emission goals clearly. I will certainly support the investment in low carbon public transport, but it will need to be a fit for purpose type of transport. It needs to be maybe smaller, more accessible, have more frequent type of buses, which can be stopped at the side of the road without the need of expensive infrastructure like is done in many other countries around the world. We will need to look at electric cars, which can reduce our carbon footprints, but the uptake probably might take some time because of affordability. Most people cannot really afford it, and because of few charging points that are still there. We need to look as well at existing situation, which is what it's called eco-driving, meaning providing people that are driving gasoline type of power cars, at least until we have a fully transition to other forms of transport and let them know how to drive better in order not to have so much emission. We'll need to clearly encourage our people, not just on the ground, but to avoid less air travel. And we need walking and cycling as important urban design features, which are critical in their use. So one of the things that I will certainly lobby for, I understand that Waka Kotai has set up a fund called the Innovating Streets for People. And Tasman District Council has received funding for 2 local neighborhoods. One of the things that I would certainly do would be to lobby for MOTUEKA to be the next neighborhood. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you. Richard Brown.
Yes, so I fully agree with Barbara on the cycleways and pushing for MOTUEKA to be in line to have the next round of funding to improve the cycleways in the town. Also completing the proposed health swimming pool in MOTUEKA, which I understand is a fair way down the track, and as we've talked about at other Meet the Candidates, it's been on the books for a long time now. But if we can provide the purpose-built swimming pool for the elderly and right through from the elderly right through to the young, that's going to take I would say a significant amount of people who are off the roads who have to travel to Richmond to the aqua pool there to have that service. And also I agree, we've got the introduction of the bus service, which is about to happen, is a great idea, but we've somehow got to incentivize people to be able to use that service and not be using their private cars. And as Brent said, it's a question of how we manage to do that. So there's a lot of work to do that, so we get people out of their private cars, encouraging carpools, and also the working from home is a really good idea. And if TDC staff and other businesses can do that on a rotational basis, so people transiting, you've got only a certain number of people on the roads each day type thing. There's lots of initiatives to explore. Thank you.
Thank you. Torina.
Right, I'm still there, aren't I? So public transport is exciting, and it needs to remain a priority. So for so long we haven't had any form of public transport in Motueka. So the fact that we will now have regional links from July next year is really exciting, and it does need to be incentivized. But remember, we've never had higher fuel prices and the congestion that we've had. So there is some motivating factors in terms of being able to do some work on a bus on the way to work that's cheaper, more affordable, and less stressful. The active transport networks, so they need to be safe, they need to be well maintained and provide a faster option to travel within the urban settlements. For Motueka, this also requires thought around the provisions for mobility scooters that we keep seeing an increase on. Proposed walking and cycleway improvements for Motueka. So there is an application going in that's leveraged off Better Off funding that will be going in to help support that initiative and fast track it. But we still need to keep those conversations going. So we are still a semi-rural ward with a regional workforce who have car ownership that is high, and more properties have less space to park cars with on their properties. So the plan that's currently, the strategy that's sitting there, does lose car parking on the side of main arterial routes. So we've just got to have those conversations with the community, because to get the wins we need across the whole board here, we need to take everybody with us. And then, yes, like we said, the work from home. And let's start with council employees and model that.
Sorry, Torina, this time. Thank you, Brent.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Brent was just saying. So living in Wellington, public transport was our main form of transport. We could actually get to work quicker than taking our car. But it needs to be affordable, accessible and reliable, and for our rural route, frequent, which might take a little bit of time to get some uptake in our smaller towns. But if you drive demand and provide a really good service, then you should get that uptake naturally. And like the other candidates just said, expanding and maintaining our cycleways to encourage more use. I personally have reservations about the push for electric vehicles when it takes 500,000 gallons of water, I think, used to extract 1 tonne of lithium for the battery. Doesn't make environmental sense to me, let alone the impacts on the surrounding farms where that water is taken from. So I think before any sort of plans are settled, that we really need to, or council should really research and share a variety of information sources, encourage some robust discussion, and help educate and evoke action by empowering self-reliant communities to assist in locally driven solutions.
Kia ora. Trindi.
Thank you. So yes, I wholeheartedly support the move for Tasman District Council to do our public transport with the buses that they're talking about starting on the 1st of July. It's pretty exciting to think they've already put out there that they're going to do 4 return trips to Motueka per day. I'd like to hope that we can champion and get lots of bums on those seats. I'm definitely supportive of the walking and cycling initiatives that are happening, because if we can walk, if we create these small communities that we will talk about in another question, and we're able to walk and cycle, that's going to reduce a whole lot of emissions right there, because we won't have to get behind the wheel of a car. I personally have been carpooling. There's only 2 councillors in this last term that have carpooled, and I'm proud to say that we have done that consciously to reduce my own carbon footprint and the emissions that I, put out there every day that I move to go over to Richmond when I can't Zoom. The other thing that I'm really keen on continue to pursue is the upgrade of the fleet of vehicles that Tasman District Council currently use. I'd like to see way more hybrids used, and eventually move to e-vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, Trindi. And now we'll hear from Ian Palmer.
Right. Ian says, while there's no easy solution to our transport options, TDC has taken the right steps in supporting public transport between our populated areas, but we don't have the population to support the level of public transport we'd like to have that can be sustainable in its own right. But we need to continue to promote the use of public transport between our urban centres as a responsible way forward. Unfortunately, transport in our region is driven by vehicle use, whether we like it or not, due to its rural nature, but that shouldn't dampen our efforts to demonstrate alternative options. TDC could support the installation of more EV charging options to assist in the uptake of electric vehicles as the fleet capacity grows. I fully support the continued development of cycleways and walkways throughout the region. Dedicated commuter cycleways are an important component in helping to offer alternative solutions to cars. They can help to offer a greater level of safety for both the cyclist and motorist.
Thank you. Now, Joanna, you're for the next question.
Right. And I will address this one first to Richard Brown. Here is the question, Richard, on urban intensification. Urban intensification has become essential to cut our vehicle kilometres per person, which are among the highest in the entire world. In our future development strategy, how should TDC's planning, consenting, and investment efforts accelerate urban intensification over the next 3 years?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is understand and accept the value that the horticultural land surrounding Motueka bring to the economy, and also for jobs creation, so on and so forth. So I think we need to stop the spread of going west as far as the horticultural land goes. When it comes to infilling all the spare ground that we have in Motueka itself, I'm no expert on that, but I think we really need to think and research the best way of doing that. I was having a chat to a guy the other day who has had some involvement with the houses in Christchurch, 3-story houses, and he said that they're not that comfortable to live in. They're quite impractical, especially up on the 3rd stories, and they do a lot of shading. So there's a lot of work to do that we actually get it right as far as urban intensification, because we don't want to pick up things and do things that we're going to regret in the next 10, 15 years. I agree we need to do something, but a lot of work to do to make sure we get the right formula. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next to Tarina for this same question.
Yeah, actually, I completely agree with Richard. Just ensuring an aesthetic balance between the old and the new, and not ending up like some of the other centres where I think they're proposing intensification for developers of a minimum of 6-story requirement. So in addition to the denseness that would create in our environment, it will also lead to another problem whereby smaller contracts will be unable to compete with big players. But a reasonable intensification in town centres, such as utilising the spaces on top of shops where we have some accommodation in Motueka that works really well. Although I have been down the town early hours of the morning trying to catch a vandal, and I wouldn't want to live near the constant beeping of the traffic lights that keep going. But other than that, it's a solution to ease off targeting productive lands for subdivision.
Thanks, Tarina. And now Trindi.
Thank you. There is a need for the provision of suitable and adequate housing for a growing population within existing urban boundaries. The simple exercise of rezoning and utilising productive horticultural land for residential housing is not the answer. Box-like, one-size housing that fits all produces more problems than solutions. A far more sophisticated approach is required that identifies the different needs of everyone in the community. It includes the provision of infrastructure development that assists the community to develop as a progressive society with an acute eye for existing and new businesses, recreation and sport facilities. And yes, those that include the proper care and nurturing of senior folk and specific needs of our younger generation too. Certainly there is a requirement for more so-called infill housing, granny flats and similar structures. Likewise, apartments, blocks tailored for specific locations offer some answers. I would eagerly support and advocate for in-depth analysis and suggested solutions of this problem by well-qualified professionals. A real benefit of the urban agglomeration of people is an increase in economic activity. They do not waste time commuting, become more productive, and generally speaking, a lot happier too. I'm all for creating 20-minute towns, the compact community hubs. Thank you.
Thank you, Trindi. And now in order we would go to Ian Palmer. So I'll quickly read his short comment on this. Housing intensification is certainly one of the key strategies going forward. The increased population allows for better sustainable transport solutions, as well as preventing the scarce productive land being used for housing. Like any strategy, consultation is key to getting the balance right. The biggest challenge to all development is infrastructure and its ever increasing cost. Okay, so that's Ian's. And now we go to Barbara for that, for urban intensification.
Yes, thank you. So I would look at making some changes to the Tasman Resource Management Plan, which probably needs some consideration to make some changes to accommodate new changes that would allow for higher density mixed use and proximity of different activities, for improved and affordable housing, like Trindi said, a more appealing urban living that you really would like to be around there, more and better parks, playgrounds, and private gardens. To make urban living appealing and to expand capacity, then the Tasman Intensification Action Plan requires really urgent revision in order to incentivize better and more efficient kind of growth and development. Maybe we should look at the new Wellington Regional Policy Statement, which is intended to minimize urban expansion, improve transportation, lower emission, create a 15 minutes neighborhood in the case of our township, and provide more dedicated walking spaces. To protect our rural environment, clearly we're all in agreement on this, we should also establish very clear rural-urban boundaries. We also need to revisit the future development strategy, which proposes creating new development on greenfield land and which have negative impacts on high productivity land around MOTUEKA. We need also to create a Nelson Tasman council control urban development organization, which would be responsible for facilitating high quality intensification. My understanding is that there is funding that has already been allocated, $75,000, to do a feasibility study on an eventual council control urban development organization. So I would really lobby, work hard, really with all my heart, for that study to go ahead in order to make informed decisions for the proposed urban development organization for quality type of intensification, and really to have inside that agency capable, innovative, forward-thinking urban planners.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. And to Brent, same question on urban intensification.
I guess the devil's advocate in me goes, how much growth does MOTUEKA really deserve?
Oh, Brent, your mic has. I don't know if you lean forward and speak close to it. I don't know if that's going to help.
How about now?
Yes.
I've worked this trick out.
Good.
So I guess for me, the devil's advocate in me goes, how much growth does MOTUEKA desire? So I actually quite enjoyed growing up in a rural settlement of a few thousand people. So I think I don't think we need to expect that growth is always a good thing and a desire of everyone, but where that happens, absolutely, intensification of the urban catchment in MOTUEKA is a must. And I've said at one of the other meetings is that I suffer from that NIMBYism in terms of I don't really want a 3-story structure next to my single-storied house, but in terms of intensification, it's a must. I think it's important to recognise that it only came out this week. The government has introduced a national policy statement on the highly productive land, and so that NPS, I believe it comes in play in October, will protect land in terms of inappropriate subdivision use and development. So government's already sent down yet another a message that councils shall follow, but in terms of restrictions of that highly productive land, that NPS is there. So the key tool council will have is the development of the TEP. So where that and how and what development looks like is really important. But the devil's advocate in me is how much do we want to grow? I don't want to be a city.
Thank you, Brent. And back to Gillian now.
This question is about biodiversity, and how would you use council land to increase biodiversity? And some of the options might include wetland restoration, pond water retention, urban greening. But how would you use council land to increase biodiversity? Not sure where we're at, but we'll start with Barbara.
Yes, thank you again. So would I support? Yeah, absolutely. I would really support. And I would support by what I advised about 11 years ago to Wakakotai, which is really the first step would be to plant around council land more native trees, do native tree planting together with community. I mean, it's so successful. I do support all of the proposition that you have, wetland restoration, pond water retention, urban greening, all of it. I would actually very much support more green carbon sequestration, which is a project that you've been doing. I would and I would really support initiative on resilient natural ecosystems to bring them really back. I would then go for more community type of led projects, not just top-down council type of projects. And I would actually try to be more inclusive and do inclusive conservation initiative that will support enhance Indigenous and community stewardship. I would use citizens' data. There are so many examples around the world. They're using fantastic citizen involvement type of work around land conservation. And I will actually possibly, and above all, do quite a lot of awareness, learning, education, teaching people how they already have the knowledge that we need and how we can bring that knowledge on conservation to support work of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Richard.
Yeah, this is such a it's such an important aspect of the district, well, for everywhere, but it's particularly in Motueka, and the last 20 years, I guess, of the work that's been done on the inlet here behind. I live on Trawaver Street, so the walkways in the inlet there with the planting, all the planting that's been done there. There's a great example about what we can do right throughout the whole district on council land. And I agree, the more trees and also getting it back to the natural state where you've got the right shrubs, trees, so you're getting the layered fauna in place, bring back the bird life, but also looking underneath the soil and into the soil and getting that biodiversity created there, understanding what the best way is with composting, so on and so forth, and non-weed spraying, so that you're getting those living organisms back into the soil. That's really what is, and really the council should be setting the example as far as these things go. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Tarina.
Yeah, 100% agree, and would support innovative use of council land for conservation. And I believe quite a lot has already been done, some really good conservation projects to date. Not damaging natural habitats is the preference, but obviously restoration where it's safe for our wildlife and harmonious for our communities. Just touching on what Richard was saying, yeah, native planting and awareness and education around glyphosates. So try not to use any of those deadly weed killers that are actually affecting our soil and biodiversity.
Thank you. Trindi.
Thank you. My position on the subject is a positive one. However, the merits of each piece of property for such measures does require study and an individual assessment. A wholesale one make, one style for each is required. I've already talked about the rejuvenation of the wetlands and the restoration of the Mootri Inlet and other estuarine waters to promote natural coastal marine life, because I understand that they are excellent carbon sinks. The practicalities of not harming the marine environment are not in themselves difficult. For example, self-containment washdown facilities for cleaning the hulls of our boats down at Port MOTUEKA, and the removal of toxic waste and litter from our local waterways, rather than letting it drift into the sea, to me seems to be an obvious choice. The encouragement of riparian, sorry, I can't say the word, planting, such as in the Motueka Lagoon around the foreshore, is an excellent example of community care and involvement. Wetlands too require constant monitoring and the regular clearing of debris from culverts to facilitate proper drainage and the promotion of wildlife to them, which enhances all of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian Palmer.
Okay. Ian says, I'm a strong believer that any council land suitable for conservation should be developed accordingly. The recreational benefits can be significant alongside the environmental benefits.
Short and sweet. Brent.
And I'm hoping I'm right. Yes, I've got this sort of. So again, for me, it comes back to community inclusion and the partnership. So all the wetland restorations and the replanting and the native replanting projects that are successful that you could reel off are all been with partnership with community groups. So it comes back to being council being the landowners or the land guardians and being able to access funding to partner with community to actually do that sort of work. Also, the community partnerships team that run the programs, the Enviro School programs. So we need to start this at the really early age. So again, it's about those partnerships and getting, getting their input in terms of what are we going to do with this green piece of council land or this ungreen piece of council land. And personally, I'd like to see a reduction in forestry. So as it's milled and as it's taken down, a slow reduction of forestry and replanted of natives.
Thank you, Brent. So that's it for that question. Now for the next question, I think we've got time for another question. So Joanna, would you like to talk the adaptation question?
Yes, and for this one, I'll start with Tarina. And the question is, scientists report that coastal inundation will occur in Tasman district much sooner than expected. What further specific actions should council take?
I think the mix of the 5 proposed coastal management approaches are good, with a need for case-by-case considerations, and looking to overseas examples of affordable, effective coastal protection alternative strategies, such as the hill block revetment system, if I've said that right, and council can ensure regulations are appropriate to encourage forward-thinking alternatives.
Thank you. And now to Trindi on that topic.
So making available the outcomes of scientific research to decision makers in all sectors of society is critically important. Keeping abreast of the research as more and more information comes to hand will influence investment investments and infrastructure development. Anticipating these changes is not a simple task and will require from Council an open-minded approach. And if we start making some action now, we may very well be able to slow down the sea level rise that we are facing. Making every build one that is agreed to the green building standard is one way of moving forward to reducing our carbon emissions.
Thank you, Trindi. Now we go to Ian Palmer, and he says, TDC's role is to seek the best advice available and then make informed decisions on the way forward. It would be lip service of me to indicate what actions are required. I'm not an expert. Okay, and now we go to Brent on that topic.
You said that well. I should probably use less words. So I've got to talk about more analysis, more discussions, and catalysts to have communities engaged in what should occur. So one of the unfortunate things that happened, there were a number of distressed residents, older residents in our community, when the original mapping of sea level rises was released. They thought that in the next 2 to 3 years their properties were going to be underwater, and what were they to do? So the communication needs to be much better than it has been in terms of that communication about that. But personally, I'm not sure if we invest in intervention or we invest in building resilience. So there's likely to be future events that require decisions to be made, whether it is something we can remedy or something we start retreating around specific areas. Now, so fundamentally, really important about preparedness, community resilience, and just having good, reliable information that's shared in plain English so that people can come on this journey, because it is something that worries a lot of older residents. And I guess just as a sideline, we talk about sea level rise, and we're going to talk about weather events in a minute. You know, we also have the Alpine Fault, the AF8 scenario in the next 50 years potentially. So I'm thinking more of the investment in preparedness and community resilience, because there will be times when we have to rely on our small satellite communities to look after each other.
Thanks, Brent. Now to Barbara on this question.
Yes, thank you. So if I understand correctly, last year there was a consultation on TDC coastal management project, and there was even a community feedback around October or something like that. Now, we do have a national adaptation plan. We know that the Resource Management Act is currently being reformed, and future government direction will actually inform future phases of this TDC coastal management project. So we're a little bit into moving waters at the moment. Like Brent said, the communities they actually asked, they said that they wanted to implement coastal management resources, action to respond to climate change. There was general support to accommodate, but I think that there is a need to now consider specific options at the local level around Tasman, and then consider their respective cost, benefits, potential adverse effect, as well as redoing again a process to learn, inform, and then learn from the community. I think that it could be improved, but there are two specific actions that could be taken now, and this action would come from the guidance that it's given by the National Adaptation Plan, which offer two specific options on coastal management. The first one, and these options are offered to councils. The first one is to develop 3D coastal mapping. This will help council assess the impact of sea level rise, tsunami, and storm surges on their communities, infrastructures, and biodiversity. And the second action that the National Adaptation Plans suggest is to engage with government and staff to implement the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. So there are two very clear type of action that council should take, and I would actually lobby for these first two initially.
Thank you, Barbara.
And finally to Richard.
So living in Triover Street, right on the beach, it's quite interesting when we talk about the potential for sea level rises. From a practical point of view, I think we can do lots of things. I mean, we talked about tree planting and so on and so forth. So I think shoring up our beaches and our rivers just by introducing native trees that have been, there in the past, and grasses, so on and so forth, is actually will help with erosion issues. And that's a big part of it. It's a funny thing because the MOTUEKA River actually feeds the sandbar. So we've got to encourage the more and more silt that we can get out onto that sandbar, because that actually helps to protect us, but it doesn't do much for the actual seabed life. So there's a bit of a balance there. And I agree, we've got to get the experts in, but we need to get a hurry on. I mean, the experts have been telling this for a number of years now, so that the information must be there that we can start making changes. Also, long term, we need to have a retreat plan, and that is to move the new developments, new housing develops, housing communities up onto the Mereri Hills, where the land is less productive and it is going to be resilient from any sea level rises. And you can create wonderful communities up there which are self-contained, which alleviate the need for people to travel far if they've got all the services within them. So I think this issue actually provides exciting opportunity for the future.
Thank you. Back to Gillian now.
This question's in the same vein. We're all seeing just how costly severe weather events are. What should be done in your area to reduce local vulnerability to severe weather events? Tarina, shall we start with you?
Thanks. Well, I think we mentioned it before, but I believe like the river management is a good way to reduce local vulnerability, to alleviate like burst stock bank flooding. We're out in Driwaka, so we've got the stock bank there, and there's a lot of gravel build up that I know council have recently been managing, but it needs to be all the way, obviously, in balance with other things, but community engagement and historic review on the natural waterlines. So years ago, some rivers and waterways were redirected from their natural course out in this area. So I think we need to investigate if this deviation has impacted, and if so, a cost-benefit analysis on remedial options to aid in flood management, education around coastline development, where possible, creating reserves and greenfields, allowing for movable structures like tiny homes as temporary residential sites. I agree with Richard on the building of the planting of natives around those coastal lines, especially going back to what historically was working. I think there's a lot of room for us to investigate into that area.
Thank you. Trindy.
So the evidence from Cyclone Geta in 2018 suggests that much of the damage to the large areas of the MOTUEKA catchment was caused by poor logging practices by the forestry industry. Huge quantities of slash and resilient sedimentation from several blocks caused immense difficulties from the Shagri through to Sandy Bay, Maraho and other areas. We today are still recovering from that. The local coast received a lot of unwanted forestry debris, cluttering beaches and other waterways. There is no doubt that forestry has to change. We can't change the weather events, but we can address some of our forestry practices. There is a merit, I believe, in designing new methods of growing trees and the externalities of the economics associated with the silviculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Trindy. Ian Palmer
says, my ward is mostly urban. The major considerations for MOTUEKA are mostly based around flooding and in the future sea level rise. We have much greater challenges in some of our wider rural areas that potentially require more urgent attention. We face massive challenges around climate change over the next 50 to 100 years, and our biggest impediment to solutions is ourselves. We must look beyond today or next week and think about our future generations, something we're not currently good at.
Thank you. Brent.
Hello. Yes. So I guess we are seeing more intense rainfall. Our stormwater capability and the forestry practice that Trinity alluded to, especially on separation point gravity, has been key contributing factors to flooding events in our ward. But we've also had the 2020 Boxing Day hail event, and we've also had droughts. So for me, it's a bit about starting to address the cause. Because yes, MOTUEKA stormwater needs the upgrades that are proposed, but we run a lottery in MOTUEKA, and that's around every rainfall at a time of high tide. And it is a lottery. We just hope that we don't have a back full of water coming down the hills and heavy at the same time that coincides with the high tide reading. So in terms of promoting retention of stormwater on properties and new builds, it has to be a must. And there has to be a mechanism to encourage existing homeowners and assistance to get stormwater retention on their property. It's also important to acknowledge, though, that modelling and predictions do not always reflect reality. So the most recent weather event where west of MOTUEKA and Golden Bay were the alerts, it actually hit Maitai. So we've got to be a little bit careful in terms of modelling and predictions because Mother Nature doesn't always go to plan or models. So again, for me, it comes back around preparedness, community resilience, and we need to be able to look after ourselves. And I guess for MOTUEKA, really keen in terms of having civil defence controller based in MOTUEKA, not out of the Richmond hub, as Golden Bay have their own over there as well. Because there will become a point in time where MOTUEKA will have to look after MOTUEKA, Rewalker will have to look after Rewalker at different stages. So it's about resilience for me, as Mother Nature's setting us a pretty damn good message saying you need to listen to me more.
Thank you, Brent. Barbara?
Thank you. Well, to reduce local vulnerability to severe weather event, there are 7 steps which are internationally used and tested around disaster risk reduction. And these are to ensure that you have a baseline for assessing climate vulnerabilities. 2, to map and avoid high-risk zones. 3, to build hazard-resistant structures and housing. 4, protect and develop hazard places and like reefs, forests, etc. 5, develop a culture of prevention and resilience in our communities. 6, improve early warning and response systems. And 7, strengthen our council and develop policies and plans. In the last few 6-8 months, an 8th point step was added, which is collaborate and negotiate with government and insurance industry the best outcomes from homeowners when their homes are impacted and most of the time lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Richard.
Thank you. I agree with Brent. Resilience is where we need to be. I remember when we had 2 cyclones within 10 days, I think. There was FIFA followed by Gita, and FIFA did the coastal damage, and Gita did all the damage in and around Brooklyn, Rewalker, and Sandy Bay areas. I agree we've got to get the slash out of those forests, and there should be dead set agreements with the forestry companies to actually remove those. But also the MOTUEKA and particularly the MOTUEKA River, it does need targeting gravel extraction. And it was really interesting for those of us who were at Rotary the other night, and Neil Jackson talking about just that. And I think we're missing a trick there where council can be talking to experienced local contractors exactly about things that can be simply done to actually make us more resilient in those areas and keep any floodwaters free flowing, so on and so forth. It's a matter of just getting those trees planted as well, and just building that resilience. And I agree with Brent, civil defence, we need to have a plan for ourselves here, so that everyone knows exactly what's going to happen, and we have all that sort of thing sorted rather than rely on someone from further away. Thank you.
Thank you. Tarina, what do you think should be done to reduce local vulnerability to severe weather events?
I think
I
Tarina.
think I answered first.
Oh, right. Okay. We're done. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're doing pretty well, actually. I don't think we've got any questions in the chat. We've got just a few minutes left. Would you like another question, or do you think we should just finish up now?
I'm wondering, Gillian, if you or Joanna want to tell us something. Because it's a good opportunity in terms of, in your opinion, what more could council do to progress the work that you're championing?
I'll give it a go first, and Gillian.
I can collect my thoughts.
I would like I'd like TDC to extend its revised climate action plan to the community as well as council operations. Now, in saying that, I know in many ways it actually does. Its walking and cycling plan, its safe streets plan, and so on, really do have to do with climate action in the community. But I'd like it to be more deliberate in having a community climate action plan. And it won't surprise you, Brent, and other candidates to know that I and people in the Climate Forum think it's enormously urgent. We're not on track with our emissions reduction, and it falls to, at many levels, national government, individual responsibility, but this local councils are enormously important. Transport in Tasman is our big carbon vulnerability. I was not exaggerating when I said we're among the worst in the entire world. We actually are among the worst in the entire world in terms of vehicle kilometres per person. And I was happy with a lot of the answers that candidates gave on the transport question. Lots of you really see the need to get people out of cars and into the buses that we'll soon have, not soon enough, but we'll soon have, and other modes of transport. But there's lots more we can do. I think TDC has made a good start on school transport plans. That needs to happen faster. I think the job is well done, just needs to go faster. That's enough from me at the moment. I mean, my feeling every day is urgency. It's not, nature's not going to wait for us to, work out the trade-offs and so on. We really have to get going on this. Gillian, what do you want to say?
Well, I'll answer this question wearing my Tasman Environmental Trust hat. And one of the things that I think is important is working with people in their own communities to come up with their own solutions and empower them to make those solutions work. People generally have a pretty good idea about what needs to be done, but often they just need support to actually make it happen. In the area of improving biodiversity, there are a lot of people who are really keen to do planting on their own properties, on reserves, and I think council could look at ways of supporting communities to increase the amount of planting that they're doing. And I also think that somebody mentioned clear communication and education. Once again, the more people understand about what can be done to increase biodiversity and reduce carbon emissions, the more likely they are to take steps to do that themselves. For example, waste reduction and methane, how many people actually understand the link between those sort of things. And so I think education is very important, and simple communication. So that would be where I would look for council improvements. Thank you.
Thanks for asking us, Bren. Very nice of you to.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you both.
We don't expect to have a chance to put our views. Gillian, can I just check whether our shy participants might like to ask a question? Either Katerina or Inba may have something on their mind or a comment they want to make that we could just check to see.
Oh, thanks, Joe. No, I don't have a question. I think you're all great, actually. I wish we could have all of you on the council. If we had all of you on the council, you might have a chance of making a difference. But anyway, you've done well. Thank you.
Thank you,
Katerina.
No questions from me either. I'm listening and watching and making my decisions. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Well, I think Katerina's right. It's been a very interesting discussion tonight, and you've all made some very good answers to some of those questions. Thank you for putting yourselves forward to serve the community and for wrestling with the questions. We'd like to thank the Lottery Grants Community Projects for funding the advertising of these events, and we think this is a good way of getting the message out there. So maybe we'll be thinking of doing some more of these online discussions sometime in the future. Finally, a closing karakia. This karakia describes a situation where we've been paddling a waka together on the sea and we've landed on the shore. We pause to reflect on what we've done together. Ko te hā, ko te pō, ko tangara, ko te mana, ko te kataitanga o ngā mata waka, hau mea.